Hello, and welcome to Not Very Scary Stories. This will be our third haunted history episode. Today we will have two stories of haunted locations. I'd like to leave these up to you whether you'd like to believe it, as I've said before that the point of this brand's video series at first was to prove whether ghosts exist or not. I still stand behind the sentiment that these could all be fake or real. You can decide for yourself. I wasn't positive on where to start for this, so I used a list called The History Behind 40 of the Most Haunted Places in America to start with, then proceeded with research, and stories that are backed by witnesses or more than one report. I'd like to thank you guys for the support thus far on all platforms you can find us on, including YouTube. I'd also like to remind everyone that if you have any scary stories or experiences you'd like to share, email me at darkskygamenews@gmail.com and tell me how you'd like to be credited. I'm Zenith Dark Sky, and I'll be your host tonight. Enjoy. The St. Augustine Lighthouse is Florida's first lighthouse, and it's said to be haunted. One of the lighthouse's first keepers was a man named Peter Rasmussen. He was known for his meticulous eye and watchful manners of maintaining the lighthouse. He was also known for his love of cigars and is one of the first ghosts that people report coming in contact with. Over the years, the smell of Peter's cigar has been detected by many, including staff members and guests. Some report being flooded with feelings of foreboding, almost a sense of dread. Perhaps the most famous encounter with this specific figure here happened in 2006 when the ghost hunters visited the lighthouse. In the episode aired the same year, a black misty figure is seen approximately 2 stories above the cast's location. The man is seen peeking over a railing before turning around and vanishing. Others have seen and heard another keeper, Joseph Andrew, at the top of the tower, only he's been dead for more than a century. His presence at the lighthouse could be explained by the fact that he fell to his death while painting the outside of the tower. His spirit never left and is often seen looking out from the top. In 1873, though, 3 sisters, along with another girl whose father worked on the site, were riding in a cart as normal. A board that stopped the cart from going in the water was not in place. The cart flipped into the water, trapping the girls underneath. Mr. Dan Sessions, a young worker, witnessed this and ran to the water. He reached the cart and lifted it from atop the girls, but it was too late. 2 of the 4 girls had already drowned. In the 145 years since the accident, strange occurrences have been attributed to the spirits of the girls. One story involves a relief lighthouse keeper living in the home in the 1950s who heard footsteps upstairs. He went to investigate, but no one was up there. The head keeper at the time was James Pippin. He was the last keeper to live at the station, swearing that the big house was haunted and he would not stay another night in it. One man, who crafted leather goods, rented the property during the 1960s. He tells the story of waking up one night with a small girl standing by his bed. As he blinked his eyes to look at her, she wasn't there anymore. Almost as if she was never there in the first place. In 1970, after standing empty for many years, the keeper's house burned down under mysterious circumstances, gutting the home, leaving only the coquina basement and a few charred timbers. Later, 16 women raised $1.2 million over the next 15 years to restore and renovate the station. During the renovation, workers and volunteers reported numerous unexplained incidents in the home. The basement was a particularly active area for ghostly encounters, being the only part of the home that had not completely burned. Today, you can still feel a spooky presence there. While the children are by no means the only tragedy that occurred in the home, the girls are some of the most active spirits around. As playful spirits, the girls enjoy playing hide and seek, sometimes including unsuspecting people. One night, in the dark lighthouse tower, a lone staff member was closing up for the night. He heard giggling at the top of the tower. Thinking that he had left someone on top of the tower, he returned to the top to find it empty. As he began to head back down the tower, he heard the same giggles below him. Descending the bottom, he once again found no one there. Another evening, a female guest on a tour was standing on the first step of the metal lighthouse staircase. When she took her first step to climb the tower, she found her shoelace tied to the staircase. On another tour, a guide found a group of young women in the basement of the keeper's home. One of the young women rented an EMF meter to measure the electrical activity caused by spirits. The woman holding the meter asked the girls if they wanted to play hide and seek. The meter spiked. The woman wandered the basement searching for the hiding girls, finally finding meter activity under the spiral staircase leading to the main floor. Excitedly, she said she'd found them and asked if they wanted to play again. Like before, the meter spiked. Once again, the young woman searched the basement for the girls, and after several minutes found electrical energy near the children's play table. The girls sometimes appear to people in fully formed apparitions. Several years ago, during the day, a guest was exploring the maritime hammock trails and came upon a young girl in a Victorian outfit, sitting on a bench, reading a book. As she began to ask the girl a question, another group came up from the opposite direction. The woman looked away for only a moment, and turned back to find the little girl on the bench gone. In a similar instance, a woman on a ghost tour approached another woman to compliment her daughter's behavior on the tour. Confused, the woman said she had no daughter. The other woman told her that a little girl had been standing by her side most of the evening. There were no children on that tour that evening. Known as one of America's most haunted homes, the Myrtles Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana, started as a working mansion during the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Possibly the most well-known of the Myrtles' supposed ghosts, Chloe, was reportedly a slave owned by Clark and Sarah Woodruff. According to one story, Clark Woodruff had pressured Chloe into being his mistress. Other versions of the legend have Chloe listening in at keyholes to learn news of Clark Woodruff's business dealings or for other purposes. After being caught either by Clark or Sarah Woodruff, one of her ears was cut off, and she wore a green turban to hide it. Chloe supposedly baked a cake containing extract of boiled and reduced oleander leaves, which are extremely poisonous. The various legends diverge as to why she did this. A housemaid who was getting the favor of the mistress was a suspect, with some saying she was getting revenge on the Woodruffs, and some saying she was attempting to redeem her position by curing the family of the poisoning. Only Sarah and her 2 daughters ate the cake, and all died from the poison. Chloe was then supposedly hanged by the other slaves, and thrown into the Mississippi River, either as punishment or to escape punishment by Clark Woodruff for harboring her. The historical record, though, does not support this legend. There is no record of the Woodruffs owning a slave named Chloe or any slaves at all. The legends usually claim that Sarah and her 2 daughters were poisoned, but Mary Octavia survived well into adulthood. Finally, Sarah, James, and Cornelia Woodruff were not killed by poisoning, but instead died of yellow fever. Regardless of the factual accuracy of the Chloe story, some believe a woman wearing a green turban haunts the plantation. In fact, it's one of the most famous ghost pictures of all time. In the 1950s, the first ghost sighting was reported by owner Marjorie Munson, who reported seeing a ghost in a green turban. Later in the 1970s, the home was bought by James and Frances Carmine Myers, who began to operate the lot as a bed and breakfast. In 1984, a journalist with Life magazine visited to write on the architecture of the 222-year-old mansion that is encased in ornamental ironwork. With this, he would bring something more to the table: ghosts. The journalist reported having been in the presence of 2 children who would call him by his name and disappear. Tita Moss is a native resident who currently owns the Myrtles Plantation along with her husband, John Moss. The couple purchased a home from Francis and James. For the first 7 years, the couple and their 2 sons lived on the top floor of the mansion while the bottom served as a bed and breakfast for traveling guests. Tita said that it was less than 2 weeks into their new life that she experienced her first taste of the supernatural when a ghost called out her name in her husband's voice. But her husband was not on the property at the time. Tita mentioned that her sons often saw apparitions of children around the home as well. Tita even has a deeply personal story, stating, "It was 1993. My youngest son, Morgan, was 10.5 months old and in the care of his nanny, sleeping in an antique bed with iron railings. I was in my office typing the menu for the day for our restaurant," she said. In this Lauren Bacall raspy voice, I heard, "Check your baby." I disregarded it, thinking that my mind was playing tricks on me out of pure exhaustion, so I continued typing. "Check on your baby," the raspy voice said again. Then I knew I couldn't ignore it, so I went to Morgan's room and, sure enough, he wasn't there. I ran around the house yelling his name and finally, heading out of the front door to the brick courtyard, there he was, toddling toward the edge of the pond. I screamed, "Morgan!" and swooped him up. When I held him, a warm blanket enveloped the 2 of us, so real that I could feel the fabric and warmth. Then that same voice said to me, "You need not worry. Your family will never be harmed here." That was a transformation for me, and I truly believe the spirits here are angels to protect us. Anytime I ever encounter them, it is for a greater purpose. Hester Eby, director of tourism here, even has an account of her own story. "I saw a little girl coming up the walkway with her mother and father," said Hester. "The man asked for tickets for him and his wife, and I asked, 'What about your daughter?' He quickly changed a smile to a frown to let me know they may never have children. But coming up the walkway behind them was a little girl," I thought. I was going to tell the little girl how pretty she was. She had long blonde hair and was dressed in an antique white dress, skipping behind her mother. The father was very serious when I asked, and when the lady came up, of course I didn't mention the child who disappeared. When they got in the house with the tour guide, I went outside to look for the baby. I walked up the porchway into the front, and when I put my hands in the door to go in, she giggled from the north end of the porchway and said, "Hello there." And she disappeared again. She was playing tricks with me. There are a variety of other legends surrounding the plantation. The house is allegedly built over an Indian burial ground, and the ghost of a young Native American woman has been reported. The house was supposedly ransacked by Union soldiers in the Civil War, and legend claims that 3 were killed in the house. Supposedly, there is also a bloodstain in a doorway, roughly the size of a human body, that will not come clean. A mirror located in the house supposedly holds the spirits of Sarah Woodruff and 2 of her children. According to custom, mirrors are covered after a death, but legend says that after the poisoning of the Woodruffs, this particular mirror was overlooked. The uncovered mirror reportedly trapped the spirits of Sarah and her children, who are occasionally seen or leave handprints on the mirror. The plantation is also reportedly haunted by a young girl who died in 1868. Despite being treated by a local voodoo practitioner, she supposedly appears in the room in which she died and has been reported to practice voodoo on people sleeping in the room. There is also a ghost who reportedly walks, staggers, or crawls up the stairs and then stops in the 17th step. Some say this is William Drew Winter, the victim of the only verified murder in this house. He was shot on his front porch and staggered or crawled up the stairs, but collapsed, dead, on the 17th step. Alternate versions of this murder claim he managed to crawl up the stairs and collapsed in his wife's arms in the 17th step. Either way, there's something up with that 17th step.